Today's episode is brought to you by Audible.com, the premier provider of downloadable spoken word entertainment. You can get a free audiobook from Audible by visiting audiblepodcast.com/mission log.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 125, The Outrageous Okona.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Ken Ray. Each week on Mission Log, we dig around in an episode of Star Trek looking for messages, morals, and meanings, like a college kid digging around in a couch cushion for beer money.
What was that?
Oh, I got us a laugh track. You try it.
And we'd love to hear from you, like a person in the sitcom from the 70s likes to hear from an in-law. Like an animal likes to hear is going to the veterinarian. Like a veterinarian likes to hear from an in-law.
Well, that was 99 cents well spent. You were saying about getting in touch with us.
Oh, yes, I was indeed. Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. You can contact us in all of those places where our handle is Mission Log Pod, or you can call us 323-522-5641. You can email us missionlog@roddenberry.com, and we would encourage you to check out our website, which includes discovered documents and other content, missionlogpodcast.com. And we have 2 additional distributors where you can pick up Mission Log. TrekMovie.com and Trek FM. That's Trek.fm. Remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log.
This week, it is The Outrageous Okona. Okona?
Truly outrageous.
Oh, man. Indeed. Guest stars aplenty on this episode. Some of them, I think, before they were stars. Is that fair to say?
That's very true, Ken.
Yeah.
And I'll have to warn you that in trivia, because by warning you, I'm warning the audience, I'm not going to go through every guest star and every credit they ever had.
Really?
So we'll just do the highlights.
All right.
Yeah. So today's episode, the main guest star is Bill Campbell.
Woohoo!
Who, also known as William Campbell, but not to be confused with William Campbell, who was also on the original series playing a cad. He, of course, played Trelane, and he played Koloth in The Trouble with Tribbles. Fantastic actor. This is a different William Campbell, also a fantastic actor.
Well, this was William O. Campbell.
Yes. Yeah, he's credited as William O. Campbell. He's not always credited as William O. Campbell. But,
no, he's Billy Campbell, isn't he?
Yeah. Sometimes he's Billy Campbell.
Yeah.
Now, of course, Bill Campbell was the Rocketeer.
Yes, he was.
And I love that movie, and I love him in it. So
do I. Well, I barely remember him in it, honestly, but I just remember loving that movie. I barely remember.
The movie.
Yeah, I have good feelings, good memories about that movie. I really couldn't tell you much about it. Timothy Dalton, I know. Jennifer Connelly.
Well, I was to say, you can't forget those two.
Alan Arkin.
Right.
Great cast. Yeah. I barely remember anything that happened, but I think I loved the rocket outfit and the helmet.
Yeah. Let's go watch that now.
You want to?
Yeah. Bill Campbell was also a regular on Armistead Maupin's Tales of the City, and he was later on a show called The 4400, created by Next Gen writer Renee Echeverria and DS9 producer Ira Stephen Bear.
Did they finish that, by the way, like in novels or something? Because I was a serious 4400 fan. I didn't know there was a Star Trek connection. Yeah, I used to watch it every week.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was also Bill Campbell, by the way, or Billy Campbell, whichever, was also in The Killing. For I think definitely the first season. I want to say the first 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Just thought I'd share that with you. There's no Star Trek tie-in there, but I was also a fan of that.
I'm sure if we dug hard enough, we could find one, at least a couple of degrees of separation. We also have today Joe Piscopo as the comic. Here's the thing. I've always liked Joe Piscopo because I've always liked Saturday Night Live, even when Saturday Night Live is bad, and even when Joe Piscopo stopped being cool. He is talented in some kind of weird weird way. He does a mean Sinatra, and I would say that he looks more like Sinatra now than when he was doing Sinatra 25 years ago, well, more than 30 years ago on Saturday Night Live. There is a reference in his act to Jerry Lewis, and Jerry Lewis was originally considered for this role, which would have been a very different show.
I would have loved that.
Yeah.
I would have just absolutely loved that. But I'm a huge Jerry Lewis fan, so.
Yeah, it would have been a very different show. Now, Piscopo did ad-lib a bunch of his jokes for the show. Clearly, there were a few lines that they had to work in because it was relevant to the story, but most of the comedy is stuff that he came up with to fit the scene. Now, we also have the transporter officer, Robinson, played by Terry Hatcher, and this is before Lois and Clark, clearly before Desperate Housewives. She was also on Seinfeld, and she went uncredited, something she apparently asked for since there was so little of her in this episode. She had lines, but apparently there was more to have been done with that character, and she just kind of said, I'm barely in it. Don't give me a credit. Now, Kieran Mulroney, who played Devon's son Benzel, also appeared in Seinfeld and actually in the same episode as Terry Hatcher. So while Jerry was dating Terry Hatcher's character, Mulroney's character was calling out George Costanza for double dipping. Yanar was played by Rosalind Allen. Also, she was on Seinfeld once, and she was a regular on Sequest 2034, if you remember that show.
Yeah, she played the dolphin.
No, she didn't. She came in later in the series, and I believe she was their medical officer. She replaced the previous medical officer on the show. It's the extent of my Sequest trivia knowledge right there. And of course, one of the kind of obvious bits of trivia, but we have to talk about it, is that of all the names that go by when Data is asking the computer to see comedians, you get David Livingston, who's a production manager on Next Gen, and he went on to be a producer on later shows. Ronald B. Moore, that's B as in boy, who was a visual effects supervisor, and he is also listed. It is incorrectly stated in some places that it's Ronald D. Moore, but Ronald D. Moore had not joined the show yet, so there would be no reason to put his name on the holodeck list. Now, if you watch it in HD, there are some changes and little edits to those names that go by. We can very clearly see Gary Hutzel, Mary Howard, Dan Curry, Doug Drexler, on and on and on. All very fun and entertaining people in their own right, but none of them actually stand-up comedians.
Now, John, I know we are dying to get to the recap and the meat of today's show, but before we do that, we do have a message from today's sponsor, Audible.com. Now, Audible is the place to go online for spoken word entertainment. Mostly that's audiobooks of all types: history, mystery, comedy, or show of hands. Are there any science fiction fans listening? I was talking to a Mission Log listener the other day who told me that I should check out the Eugenics Wars. They tell the tale of the rise of Khan Noonien Singh. The first book is read by Anthony Stewart Head of Buffy the Vampire Slayer fame, while Volume 2 is read by Deep Space Nine's Renee Auberjonois. Now, someone else wrote in and said that I should check out Lock-In by John Scalzi. It's about a guy who's been transferred into an android body. No idea why he'd suggest that for me, but cool. Also, it's read by Next Gen's own Will Wheaton. Now, if you're into something a bit more interactive than that, they have some radio plays that I have owned and listened to for years. They got the Star Wars radio plays that aired on NPR forever ago, featuring Mark Hamill and Anthony Daniels. And they've got the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy radio plays featuring, well, all the people from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy radio plays. And the cool thing is you can get any one of those titles for free at audiblepodcast.com/missionlog. Or you can choose from the 150,000 other titles they have. From top bestsellers to works more obscure, if you can't find something to listen to in 150,000 titles, well, you're not really trying, are you? And listening is super easy. Audiobooks work on iOS devices, Androids, Kindle Fires, Windows phones, and over 500 other MP3 players. Plus, they've got free apps for iPhones, iPads, Androids, and Windows phones. So it really couldn't be simpler. Audible is helping to support this show. So please show your support and get your free audiobook at audiblepodcast.com/missionlog. Get this, they've even got something called the Great Listen Guarantee. If you decide that you don't like the book that you chose, don't worry about it. You can exchange any book you aren't happy with for another title anytime, no questions asked. You ask, how much better could this be? And the answer is, none much better. Find out for yourself with your free title at audiblepodcast.com/missionlog. That's audiblepodcast.com/missionlog. And thanks to Audible for supporting this week's show.
So many big names and so much big talent in this show. Settle in for what must surely be one of the best episodes of The Next Generation ever.
Prologue. Traveling to the Omega Sagittarius system, the Enterprise encounters a devil-may-care, kind of dreamy freighter pilot whose navigation system is damaged. He starts with the charm right away, gets himself an invitation to beam aboard. Deanna says she feels he's safe. Wesley chimes in that the repairs to his ship should be easy. Act 1. With Captain Okona's ship in the tractor beam, the lovable scamp beams over to greet the crew and takes a little time to flirt with the transporter officer. It's not O'Brien, by the way. This transporter operator is a young woman. We'll call her Robinson. Geordi goes to work on the damaged part from Okona's ship, and after a brief chat with Data about having fun and loosening up with a joke or two, Okona goes to work on that transporter officer we met, and he met, just a few moments ago. She is clearly off duty. He has clearly been in space alone for far too long. Act 2. Captain Okona is the talk of the town. He might not be aware of it yet if he's still canoodling with Robinson, but the others on the Enterprise are trying to figure out what to make of him. Riker sees the opportunity to tell Wesley about growing up, being a man, and making your own decisions. Data is still flummoxed by what a joke is. Guinan says, yeah, I can see that. To get some help, Data goes to the holodeck, since that went so well last time. The Enterprise computer comes up with an avatar of a 20th century stand-up comedian who looks almost exactly like a 20th century comedian named Joe Piscopo. The comedian and Data talk. Data wants to learn the concept behind what makes a joke funny, what makes people laugh. The comedian takes him through many examples, and Data is doing his best to pick it up. A little later in 10 Forward, Data is trying out what he learned on Guinan. This isn't working either. He's repeating the words, but it's just not genuine. Before he can screw this up any further, Data gets called back to the bridge since there is an unidentified vessel approaching. They're not answering hails. It gets closer and then does something unthinkable. It locks lasers on the Enterprise. No, not phasers, lasers. This is what Malone meant about bringing a knife to a gunfight. And if Picard and Riker haven't found anything Data has done to be funny, they definitely find this funny. No, shields will not be raised. Act 3. The tiny, non-threatening vessel opens up a channel to the Enterprise, and a man identifying himself as Devon from the planet Atlek tells Picard that Okona is a criminal. The Enterprise must release him or prepare to be boarded. They have no jurisdiction here. Before they can do anything, though, Devon has company. Another ship arrives. This one from Streleb and commanded by Kushel. You probably have guessed by now that they want Okona as well. They are also pretty worked up about the whole thing. Meanwhile, Picard has requested Okona come to the bridge, but apparently Okona has been keeping himself busy in multiple crew quarters with, we can only imagine with whom. Worf finds Okona in the arms of some woman from the crew. The guy does have game. Now on the bridge, Okona is not telling Picard why he is a wanted man, but Picard calls the first ship and asks Devon to explain. Devon shows off his daughter, who unmistakably is with child. 3 guesses who the father is, and the first 2 don't count. Act 4. Deanna gets it. This is an honor thing. Seems like Worf might have something to say about that, too. Little different story with Kushel. He is accusing Okona of stealing jewels that are a national treasure. Either way, Picard is tired of hearing about the bickering, and he brings Okona into the ready room. Picard is in a bind since either way, if he hands over Okona to one of these other ships, he'll create a political incident, possibly war for the other. Without even knowing there is such thing as a prime directive, Okona says, look, just let me go. This is not your problem. Not a bad idea. Okona visits Geordi to see how the repairs are coming along. While he waits, he is moved by the wisdom of Wesley Crusher. Wesley doesn't get it. Why keep running from one place to another? You would miss your friends and family. That's all it took. Okona might have had a change of heart. At least we'll have time for a commercial break to think that over. Act 5. Okona has a new plan. He won't say to whom, but he has announced that he will surrender himself. Time to invite both Devon and Kushel on board the Enterprise for a chat. Devon has his pregnant daughter with him, and Kushel has his son, the one Okona befriended and then stole from. Let the bickering begin. Oh, the kids lied. Devon's daughter got knocked up by Kushel's son. Kushel's son stole the jewel as a wedding gift for Devon's daughter. Okona's off the hook. Okay. Back on the holodeck, Data is showing Guinan his comedy simulator. The comedian tells Data he probably needs an audience, and the computer creates one. Do you want to know what happens next? Too bad. Back to the Okona non-story. Devon's daughter, Yanar, is torn over the whole Montague Capulet thing. She's not supposed to marry Kushel's son Benzen, but Okona has been there all along smuggling her so the two lovers can be together. They'll marry Yanar and Benzen, and the two fathers will goad them about where they should live and who has the rights to what. Done with that now? All right, back to the comedy club. The comedian introduces Data, and he kills. The holodeck audience is just eating up everything he says. They will laugh at anything. He could really have a career doing a podcast. Data sees through it, though, and he turns the audience off. Guinan gives him a little pep talk. Being funny isn't the be-all, end-all of being human. Data's still bummed, though, in a non-feeling, totally android way, because laughing at jokes seems to be so uniquely human, except for all the other species who we have seen have a good laugh. Okona goes away. Data tells some jokes. The end. Did you find that funny?
I found the end of your recap there very funny. Yes, well done.
I like to cut to the chase, Ken.
You know, I remember going to a couple of comedy clubs in the 80s. I was maybe a little young, but I did. I remember going to some comedy clubs in the 90s. I went to I went to Catch a Rising Star in Harvard Square.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, which was a great place. I saw Stephen Wright try out some material there.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and Barry Crimmins. It was really neat. I also saw a friend of mine just absolutely die on stage. It was sort of terrible. It was really, and then he came back and sat at our table, and I was like, oh man, now you're killing me.
It's funny, the late 80s and into the early and mid 90s was such a boom for stand-up comedy. Like that, yeah. That's all Comedy Central showed, and that's all HBO showed. And it was a really, really good time to see a lot of good comedians, but also a lot of experimental, maybe not so good comedians. Yeah, and then they all got sitcoms, and suddenly the comedy club scene died. Apparently, there's actually a very good one here in Buffalo, which I haven't been to. Colin Quinn was there recently, did like 3 or 4 nights, and unfortunately, I thought he was only going to be there for one night, and I was busy that night, and I missed it, and blah blah blah. Really quickly, the whole reason I bring up all the comedy club thing, never in my life have I seen a comedy club that clean nor well lit. Right. Even the good ones. I mean, that was a swanky comedy club. It was very high end, and it was very sanitized. It was indeed. Yes. Yeah. So what did we pick up from this episode, Ken, in terms of our observations? Well, it's the Attack of the Mullet show. Yeah, there are a lot of mullets between Piscopo and look, I know he's got sensitive ponytail going, but what Billy Campbell has is a mullet. You take the hair tie out, and he goes from Billy Campbell to Billy Ray Cyrus. I'm just saying, it's ugly. Oh, I should get the laugh track back. That was that was worthy, I think. It was also kind of odd to me that the Enterprise really learned nothing from symbiosis.
What's the deal in symbiosis? You know, the ship's gonna crash and burn up or something into the atmosphere of the sun. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. And then the Enterprise, stops and saves them, and then has 44 to 48 minutes of, well, how do we get out of this? Right. So they come across the outlandish Okona. And I've been pronouncing it wrong all week in my head, so I figured I would do it for everybody else too. They come across the outrageous Okona. And what do? Oh, let's fix the ship. It's 44 minutes that you're not going to get back, Captain Picard. Right. It's going to be a long 44 minutes for you. Points though to Worf. He has learned something. Captain Picard's like, hey, let's bring Okona on board, and Worf's like, hey, why don't we not give him access to everything on the ship,
except for the women?
Well, Picard doesn't care about that. He makes that very clear when Okona's like, look, sorry about your dames. And Picard's like, I don't care what you do with the dames, whatever. Talk to me about the false pretenses under which you came on board my ship. You know, and at that point I'm thinking, well, it was really on Picard to ask.
Sure.
Should he not have said, hey, before we bring you on board, are you wanted? Will there be any glob flies coming after us?
Are you on drugs?
That would also be a decent question to ask.
That would be
him,
a good question. Yeah. Because we can take you to a planet.
Are you on drugs?
We know.
Well, no, I'm suffering from an illness, if that's what you mean. That wouldn't have helped any. You got to be a bit more specific.
But, Okona is there to shake things up, and we don't usually encounter people with eccentric personalities on the Enterprise. And if we do, we get rid of them pretty quickly, at least within 44 minutes. That's true. If they're money obsessed, or if they like country and Western music, or if
they're an admiral.
If they're an admiral, and now, if they like the ladies too much, he shows up and he's got jokes and he's got clever banter with everybody. So we need to get him out of there. Yeah, he was. Is it my imagination, or was he cosplaying as Captain as a Han Solo? He kind of was. That must have been on the breakdowns. We need a Han Solo type. He's got the vest. We need a G-rated Han Solo, though. Right. Somebody who's the devil may care, but he wouldn't actually, not say devil because that might offend somebody, and it's devil may care, but smiles a lot. Smiles a lot. There's a lot of smiling going on when he's around. Yeah. Even when Wesley's like talking him down for being such a cad. He's still smiling at him. Yeah, that's I don't know. I can see that if a young Billy Campbell got cast in this role, I would just see that actor, and in this case Billy Campbell, being very excited about that. Hey, I get to go on Star Trek and play a fun-loving, rakish cad, a.k.a. not Han Solo. Well, is it my imagination, or do we both have a little bit of a man crush on Billy Campbell? I think we do. Because, I watch that guy in just about anything. And, totally, and he does the whole smiling thing. And the first time I watched the episode, well, let's say my reaction the first time I watched the episode was different than my reaction the second time I watched the episode. He's a very charismatic guy. Yeah. I would say. And it's the same thing in the Rocketeer. When we thought he was a murderer, I was still like, but he can't be. Come on, it's Billy Campbell. Look at him. Well, it's the same thing in The Rocketeer. Part of the fun of that movie is that he is having so much fun. The character, Secord, is having so much fun with it. Yeah. Even, in that first scene when he just crashes with the rocket pack, he's like, yeah, this is great. Hey, I just remembered somebody else. The stepfather is in that movie. He plays Howard Hughes. Oh, right. Yeah, totally. Or the guy from Lost. I guess more people know him as the guy from Lost, but he'll always be the stepfather to me. Right. Yeah. Now, the conversation that Okona is having with Data is like, don't you ever get drunk? Don't you ever cut loose? And I wondered, is Data just being coy there? Because he seems to know nothing about getting drunk or having sex. Two things that he has already done in the short 1 season and 4 episodes. Well, not on alcohol. No, but it's the same thing. He knew that it was being drunk, whether or not it's alcohol. But he does clarify. He says not on alcohol. Right. Yeah. And also, what's his name? Didn't ask about the amazing Okona, the outlandish Okona, whatever. The outrageous Okona. Outrageous. Captain Okona didn't ask about sex. He asked about love. Data's doing what Data does. He's parsing it out because he's very literal. He's Data. He's not lore. Yeah. So of course he's going to ask all those questions. And in the end, the answer might be yes. But first he has to make sure he knows what he's answering. Yeah. And then we see that romantic side of Okona. He is the one who has a harder time separating love and sex than Data does.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, we'll chalk one up to him being the squeaky clean version of Han Solo.
I don't know though, because we do see him making time with 2 people immediately, and Worf makes it sound like there have been a few others.
He does. I think they said that he had been in at least 3 crew quarters.
There you go.
Maybe Okona's version of love is that he just falls in and out of love very fast.
It could be that. Yeah,
it was a whole relationship. And speaking of Worf, finding him, that was I had to write this down because it's so odd. Worf has this weird line when he interrupts Okona and some babe in flagrante. He says, "I'd like that," but Okona hasn't said anything. Yeah. It's very awkward. He just catches them and they're in the embrace, and Okona kind of turns toward him, and he doesn't like rush him. He doesn't pull a knife on him because obviously they took the knife away. But he doesn't do anything. And Worf just like gives him the glare and is like, "I'd like that." Well, and it's like, you'd like what? Because there's something very different going on here than a fight. And on top of that, Worf gives a very disapproving look to the woman that Okona was with right before he leaves with Okona. Like, Okona walks by Worf. He's already out on the corridor, and Worf just takes a moment to just give this woman the look. And I'm here to say that's not cool, and it's not respectful, and it's not even the tiniest bit funny.
Okay, first of all, I didn't notice the look, but I honestly gave her a look. And it has nothing to do with the fact that, she is a wanton woman or anything like that. It has nothing to do with how she spends her off time. It has to do with the captain of her ship was calling the guy that she was there with. As a member of Starfleet, as a member of that crew, she should have been like, "No, seriously. I mean, yeah, I'm having fun. Don't get me wrong, but that's my boss's 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 boss. You really probably should go and see what's up."
Maybe the speaker didn't reach there. Maybe they had turned it off. Maybe you can do that, because that would be a great option if you're on that starship, is to be able to turn off announcements. Remember how we talked about maybe you have a printer that prints out the self-destruct?
Yes.
Maybe she had it in print mode,
right?
And she didn't get the message. I don't know. I'll give her a little bit of benefit of the doubt, but I do see where you're coming from with that. They do have FaceTime in the future, and they go full conference mode. Which is something that Picard called out. Very impressed with that.
And yet they still have they still have the Gwen DeMarco thing where you have to turn to somebody else and make it mute. Right. Honestly, Worf was sort of reduced in part of it. Well, in that part anyway, he's pretty much reduced to a remote control.
A stand-up comedian on the holodeck. This episode could easily have become a retelling of The Practical Joker.
Well, I don't want to give away the end of this episode of Mission Log. I will say it is with Herculean strength that I try to pull something of worth from this episode.
Oh, man.
At least that's my feeling. I don't,
okay.
Maybe you feel differently, and certainly it takes all kinds to fill the highway. But I do have a question. Does Starfleet deal in complete openness? I mean, is everything out there as far as Starfleet is concerned? Because the second ship, the ship with the father and the son on it, with Ben Zell and his dad, they say that they've been monitoring Enterprise communications with the other ship. Mm-hmm. Now, I can't imagine that they're great as far as decoding like encoded information, because they're still flying around with lasers. Maybe they spent all of their technical prowess on ways of cracking communications, but you would think they would have spent a little bit of time coming up with something a bit more advanced than a laser. So we're given to understand that their technology is fairly primitive, and yet no one is surprised that they were able to monitor the Enterprise communications. Mm. Is this a difference between communications and like subspace communications, or that secret code whatever communication that Picard got from his friend in Conspiracy? What's the deal? I mean, are they is everything just out in the open? Is that part of the future sort of Federation Starfleet way?
Okay, do you want me to geek out for a moment? Because I will geek out for a moment.
Please.
All right.
No, I mean, it really was. It honestly is a question sort of about Starfleet and Federation society. So, yeah, I mean, please, you can only geek out in answering that question unless your answer is geek.
Right. Well, here's the way I see it. So, a couple of ways to look at this question. I think that I think you're onto something about communication being more open, because we've established there is a lot of communication going on, and B, the computer actually listening in on the vast majority of that communication, simply because the computer has to be aware of what's going on to A, route the messages where they go, and B, make sure that the computer responds when the computer is requested to respond. So
yeah, except we've talked about that before too, though. It's always listening for the audio trigger. I mean, it always listens for its name, computer. As we sit here and record this, just in the past few months, Apple's mobile operating system, iOS, has come out with something called Hey Siri. And I'm sorry, I try not to actually say that any place that it's recorded, because somebody right now stopped listening to us and Siri just popped up and said,
and her phone just came on you.
Dude, what can I do for you?
Right.
Or whatever Siri says when you say that. So you say those words, and then that's sort of what triggers it, which is a bit different than if the computer were listening contextually, right? Right. Like if Picard was saying, they're going, oh man, I wish we knew how long it we're going to take to get there. Yeah. And the computer suddenly said, oh, well, it'll take 3.2 days. You know, then it'd be like, hey, you're chatty and listening and paying too much attention, as opposed to listening for the audio cue. But I do get what you're saying. I mean, there certainly is the potential for that to happen.
Yeah. I think it does go a little beyond just the trigger word, because there is what we've seen up until now, at least a certain level of responsiveness that goes beyond giving a direct order. And I think we will see more of that as we go along. But I do think that there is a level of openness, simply for the fact that you can go to the library computer and call up anything, and you call up the logs from another ship. You can call up the logs, which technically, yes, ship logs are treated with a certain level of openness in this kind of organization anyway. Right. But theoretically, you could go back and get personal logs. Theoretically, you could go back and retrieve a lot of other kind of information. And unless you are specifically encoding a message, as we saw in Conspiracy, you may just have to assume a certain level of transparency. Let's say that today, you know, I can go through the government and use the Freedom of Information Act to grab certain information. And some of that may be redacted and some of it may be protected under different levels of security. But I can still do it. And it just takes as long as it takes for that person then to receive the request and decide, you know, what needs to come to me to get it to me. Go 300 years in the future, and then you've got a computer that has access to everything. That can then pull that instantly. So that's one way to look at that question. But the other way to look at the question is just between these ships and this specific episode. From a technical standpoint, the way I figure it has to work is that here comes a ship. Here's the Enterprise waiting on that ship. And when Picard says open hailing frequencies, they are literally trying every frequency in the book. They are trying everything that their ship will produce to establish communication. And if that happens to be an old style FM radio, then they're going to use the old style FM radio. Therefore, the other ship that is the same technology as this, you know, the ship they've encountered would be able to read that too.
Interesting.
And you just,
well, I would think that once you actually establish communications, though, you would lock in and talk more privately. But maybe not. I mean, again, maybe that's part of the whole open, Starfleet Federation thing, or maybe that's just the technical thing that you're talking about.
Right. Well, I mean, when we transmit radio signals from Earth, they keep going and going and going, and they will dissipate the further out they get. But you could go, you know, a light year from here, a couple of light years from here, and that information will get there eventually. Yeah. You know, so Dick Biondi, Dick Biondi from 1974 is at some point going to reach Alpha Centauri.
See, I thought you were cursing at me. I don't know what a Dick Biondi is.
Old school radio host in Chicago.
Okay. Well, one of my old radio teachers, then Bermuda Schwartz, is still out there someplace, floating among the cosmos. It's interesting that you keep mentioning the computer, because there was one other thing that I thought of. Data actually seems to be acknowledging that the Enterprise computer is smarter than he is. in this episode, because when he's talking over with Guinan, who about what's funny and what makes funny and all that stuff, she says, normally I would suggest you turn to a higher power, but in your case I would suggest a smarter computer. And there's no well, I'd have to build one, or I don't even know where I'd find that. He just goes straight to the holodeck.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe the whole Moriarty thing from last week sort of has cowed him, or
I would think so. Yeah.
Or maybe he's just thinking, well, there is no smarter computer, but maybe one on a level on which I can play. It was a strange thing to see happen immediately after, considering what happened last week.
Yeah. No, I would think that would have to be the case. Is that the Enterprise computer at the very least has more access to more information.
Yes.
Like Data still has to either plug in or read things very fast, or listen to things very fast, as he did in this case. But wow. Yeah, the Enterprise computer, yeah.
At least as far as Data's concerned.
Yeah. Well, and if Data is, if he knows that the computer is smarter than him, then everybody else on the ship should still be very concerned and careful around the computer.
That could still just be Data's low self-esteem, though. I mean, go back to the episode where they're like, we're only going to send you because it's dangerous. And Data's like, yeah, you're right, because I could die.
Right.
But that's re-arguing something that happened last season, and forget it. There's so much more to talk about in this episode.
Yeah, okay, well, you mentioned Data's self-esteem.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my major note here, because here's the thing, all right? So Data, for an android who doesn't understand humor, since it comes from an emotional, spontaneous, and we'll put quotes around it, human place, Data seems to be having a very easy time with emotions like frustration, disappointment, melancholy. I mean, he looks so defeated when he can't make a joke and make a genuine joke. And I had to wonder, is this just the difficulty of writing for a character like Data, where he's not human, but human writers still have to fall back on ways for the audience to understand and care about Data's journey, his overall character arc? Because the other way to write this would simply be that Data doesn't know and doesn't care what humor is. He is an android, after all, bereft of feeling. So I like the idea presented here that humor is an essential part of being human. I would think so, and I would hope so. And being more human-like is at the core of Data's programming. But he already seems mired in a lot of other emotions since he can't tell a joke. The way it reads on his face, the way he has these conversations, the pall that comes over him when he's standing on stage and realizes that they're just laughing because the audience is programmed to laugh. That read to me as an emotion. So he's got those emotions down pat. He really works like a master in the emotions of disappointment, confusion, forlorn, melancholy, all of these things. He's great at it.
Is there a cruelty, or it doesn't even matter? Oh man, see, is there a cruelty to Sung programming Data to want to be human, or was Data programmed to want to be human? Or is this just something that happened because his positronic brain is so darn big and so darn complex? Yeah. And if that's the case, then he really should get a joke. I mean, if he really went from just being zeros and ones to this desire, well, then he is human at that point. And I'm not making a joke about the whole thing where last week they said, wanting to be human is the most human thing in the world, or wanting something and not having it. It's human nature to love what we don't have, I believe was the quote. I'm not making a joke about that. I mean, if he's made some leap from just being the world's greatest cipher to actually like a desire to do something, then he is human at that point. It seems to me, or at least he's alive. He's crossed whatever divide that is. If, on the other hand, Sung programmed him to want to be human, I don't know if that's like inflicting frustration on Data or inflicting frustration on everyone else.
Right.
Right. It's like, oh, great. The android's trying to learn comedy again, because this has been a recurring theme. I mean, no, he's not gone as far as, hiring Joe Piscopo to tell him jokes. He's not gone so far as building a comedy club set.
Yeah.
But he, he's done the whole thing where he keeps telling jokes to Geordi. I mean, that was a recurring thing in season 1.
Right.
What's the deal with that?
Well, we've talked about it a little bit before, and it kind of goes back to the semantic question about Data being programmed to try to be human, or Data being programmed to learn about humanity, to try to understand humanity. Mm-hmm. And part of that learning and understanding is to participate in the actions of being human, live among humans, work among humans, try to get the humor, try to get this. But it does seem to go that extra step further, where we blend and we have a very fuzzy gray line between learning about humanity and actually trying to be human, because he can't be human. Just by definition, Data cannot be human. He will always be Data. He will be an android, but he can come as close as possible to emulating humans. So maybe it is cruel. Maybe it was just short-sighted in the programming, or maybe Soong didn't care because Soong realized that Data is simply the combination of his programming.
Okay. Or maybe we're taking it too literally. I mean, I would imagine that Data is supposed to be some sort of stand-in for us in the way that every character on Star Trek, I believe, is supposed to be a stand-in for some aspect of us all the way through. Although,
well, sure.
The frustration, the frustration inherent in Data, constantly, I want to be something else, but I never will be, and not even being okay with it. That's the thing. Most characters, might have that moment where like, well, I really wanted to do this, but it was better to do this, or it was right to do this. No, for Data, it's just, I really want to do that, and I can't.
Yeah.
The end.
Right.
Oh, man,
well, I mean, Soong at that point is building an android that could carry around a lot of ennui. He's building this machine that is programmed to want to do something constantly and never truly being able to capture it. So he forgot to program him with the ability to just let it go. To just realize, like, hey, I don't have to do that. I don't need to be this other thing. I can be perfectly happy just being myself, and myself is an android who has these cool features and these cool abilities. Wow.
Yeah, well, I mean, in fairness, though, each model is an improvement, because before Data was Lore. Mm-hmm. Little known fact: before Lore was Marvin the Paranoid Android. So,
okay,
so
good.
I mean, things actually are getting better.
Yeah,
it might be a few more though before he gets it exactly right.
I apologize to the audience, but I have the bell that we ring when a Hitchhiker's Guide reference is made. So we'll try to cut that in later. I do want to focus just on the comedy thing a little bit, because it occurred to me that, I'm trying to parse comedy along with Data as watching the show, because you and I, we already said we're fans of stand-up comedy and fans of comedy shows, and really, who isn't a fan of comedy at some point, who doesn't like to laugh at some point. But I was thinking, maybe part of the problem with Data is that the comedian has to be in on the joke, and Data just literally can't be in on the joke, no matter what, because he can't. And he also doesn't have an ego. Comedians are telling jokes for the ability to have people listen, to communicate an idea, and to have that audience get that idea. And there's sort of a positive feedback loop going on for the comedian and the audience and the comedian. And that would have no meaning on Data either. Data doesn't make a good call on the bridge and Picard say, well done, Data, and then Data gets some satisfaction from that, like, awesome, I did a great job. No, just Data did his job, not did a great job and can feel happy about that.
Well, it depends on the episode. I mean, sometimes somebody will say, thank you, Mr. Data, or something like that, and he'll smile. Mm-hmm. But I mean, this there's actually... There was a line, and it's a total throwaway line, except it's not really a total throwaway line. Somebody says something about, I never see you laugh. Somebody says to Data, I never see you laugh. And he says, I laugh when it's expected of me.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of what we get out of Data may be, maybe that's the reason he's programmed that way, because the assumption would be nobody would want to be an android. They would want to be human. Maybe everything about Data is just living up to expectation. maybe this whole examination of, how do I be more human? How am I more comedic is actually just to make people feel better about the fact that he wants to be them. Because how scary would an android be? It's sort of like what Lore claimed happened to him on that planet, right? People got jealous of how good he was. I mean, maybe there is actually something very scary about a robot who's walking around self-satisfied, the one who's sitting at the top of the the hierarchic pyramid or whatever, however you say it.
Right.
A robot who's self-actualized would probably freak people out because as much as they think they're self-actualized, it's really only Kirk and Picard that we've met so far who actually are. Right. And maybe Riker.
Yeah. Well, let's hit on one more thing here. And I thought that the element of sexuality in the story was pretty interesting. We dealt pretty frankly with things in Justice. Everybody goes down to this pleasure planet. They're like, hey, I can do whatever I want to do, and everybody here is willing. And now, again, we have Enterprise crew members who apparently are pretty easy to be swept off their feet. That's not seen as a big deal or really any kind of deal at all, except for Worf, maybe. They all seem to have spent too much time in space with the same people and not a lot of variety there. So when the new guy shows up...
Seriously, there's 1,000 people on the Enterprise, though.
Yeah.
All right.
All wearing the same uniform,
all right.
and all sticking to the same org chart. And here's a guy who comes in and breaks it up. I can see how that would be appealing.
Well, they've apparently got some dazzling evening wear, though, and they do also have a holodeck, which has an amazing wardrobe, like side closet. They don't even get the wardrobe when they go into the holodeck. Remember, Picard had to get dressed up.
Yeah.
To go to foggy London town last week.
But it seems like nobody's ever allowed to use the holodeck because it's only senior staff. And it's always empty for them. Like senior staff can just walk down there and, okay, I'm going to go to a comedy club. Or if I'm Riker, I'm going to go mac on Minuet for a little while, All
right. Fair enough.
And Deanna refers to the problem as ancient codes of procreation when we're visited by the two other vessels. Meaningless to us, but important to them. And to me, that sounded like a Gene Roddenberry thing, kind of trying to push and mold the edge of that envelope when it came to new codes of sexuality. And also, I'm assuming that women on the Enterprise know way more about birth control than Yanar does. Because, again, Okona, he's just making his way from one room to another. And nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to be worried about that at all.
Yeah. Well, it was a different time, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so weird to me. It's so weird to think that we've actually regressed as far as sexual attitudes. And maybe some of that has to do with the AIDS crisis, or maybe some of it just has to do with the backlash on a more liberal time. Mm-hmm. But you could more freely talk about sex, it seems to me, or joke about sex then than you can now as we record this. Yeah. I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but that's sort of the feeling that I get. Was there any part of it, and forgive me, this is not me just going back to my old standby, but was there any part of it that struck you as sexist at all? The fact that Okona is able to turn Terry Hatcher's character inside of 30 seconds, and only because, well, he's just so suave and so cool, and, yeah, sure, I say this to all kinds of women, but, you're going to be turned on by it, and suddenly she is. I mean, was there any part of it that bothered you about it, or was it just sort of like... Because on the one hand, you could say, well, it's kind of empowering, right? This woman wants to sleep with this guy, and so she will, and it doesn't matter, and that's totally cool. And right. I mean, there was certainly a certain amount of a sexist attitude between Yanar and her father, although points to her because she was like, yeah, I'm not going to marry either of them. I'll show you. And of course, she does marry Benzel, but I mean, she did stand up for herself in that where. It was sort of assumed that, well, she's the woman and she's the young woman and she's in the family way. So obviously she's going to have to do, I think, what they actually referred to as the right thing.
Right. Yeah, she does stand up for herself eventually.
Yeah.
And I guess the problem with the Robinson character, Terry Hatcher's character with Okona, is that you and I and the audience at large have to kind of fill in the rest of that conversation. Because if you could call it out for being sexist. It's just that, well, here's the good-looking guy, and just by virtue of the fact that he's the good-looking, rakish guy, gets to come in and do whatever he pleases because these women are like ready and willing, right?
Yeah.
So you and I are kind of filling in the blanks and saying, okay, well, Terry Hatcher's character, Robinson, she is also a professional. She is a free agent. She is an adult, blah, blah, blah. And maybe this was stuff that could have been in an alternate version of the script where we actually get to have that conversation about what sexuality means in the future. But that didn't become this episode, and it's too bad. So if I were to chalk it up for being sexist, I would chalk it up for being sexist just because we don't get the full story.
Well, or maybe because that's the mark of how cool Okona is. I mean, he is basically that thing. Every guy wants to know him, and every girl wants to, Yeah. I mean, and so that it's like it's a very shorthand of, wow, how cool is Okona? Any woman he wants to, boom, there that is, and that's maybe it's just sort of shorthand / dare I say lazy writing, or maybe it's actually sexist, but well, we can leave that to others to decide.
Yeah.
It is a shame that Dr. Pulaski was not in this episode. How much fun would she have had heckling Data?
Ken, I was shocked that you opened the last segment kind of tipping your hat to your feelings about this episode. But
Sorry.
But I'll throw it back to you because maybe you can just, bring it home for us and just kind of summarize your feelings on the show now that we've gotten past the deep, deep meanings in the Outrageous Okona. How do you feel about it? Does the episode hold up?
No. There are parts of it. There's an air of much ado about nothing to this episode, which is not to say that it's a good episode, and it's weird to say, there's something Shakespearean about this, and yet it's crap. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's crap. I mean, you could say there's something of much ado about nothing to it, but you could also say the same. I mean, you could say there's a lot of Three's Company to it too. There's just the understanding and the guy who is assumed to be rakish and terrible, but ends up having a heart of gold and actually brings the whole thing together. That's right. He's the Jack Tripper of this episode. It might be more accurate to liken it to Three's Company. And that's also not to say that it's good. I actually had to go and look it up and see if this was a pilot for another show, because this feels like a pilot for the Okona show. And I can't find any reference that it was, so I'm assuming it actually wasn't, but it feels exactly like that. It feels like the Gary 7 episode of the original series, or it feels like an absolutely terrible episode of The Golden Girls that I saw one time, and you say you can discern, and I say, oh yes, I can. A terrible episode of The Golden Girls that had Paul Dooley and Rita Moreno in it, and it was a pilot, and it was ghastly awful for so many reasons, including, for some reason, I wanted to watch an episode of The Golden Girls, and I was sort of screwed out of that. Yeah, I know.
Wow.
This is like an onion of a story, I know. The Outrageous Okona felt like it was a pilot for a different show. And so you don't really get a satisfactory Star Trek episode out of it, but you don't get a satisfactory other show out of it either, I don't think. I mentioned the whole thing about the treatment of Yanar through it, although I do like the fact that she stood up for herself, so that's cool. All of that said, there are neat little moments. I mean, Patrick Stewart is so in this character at this point, and sadly he's relegated to being scenery a couple of times, and certainly he makes a lot of decisions in this episode that he would not make in most episodes, but he's funny. He's comfortable in this. The whole thing about when they come across the ship that points the lasers at them, and he says, we're going to lower shields, and Riker says, may I ask why, sir? Well, in case we want to surrender. Right. and also the thing where he calls for the captain to be brought up on screen, and Worf says which one, and Picard snaps at him, what? There's something very comfortable about his performance in this. Yeah. A couple of times the things with Data did make me laugh. When Guinan says, maybe it's the timing, and Data says, my timing is digital, she says it's funny. Well, she's right. It is a funny line. The Burns Nowlan thing at the end absolutely doesn't work. No. Although take my Worf, please, is kind of cute. I enjoyed the episode the first time I watched it more than I enjoyed it the second time. I think because I was so caught up with, hey, that's Billy Campbell. Hey, that's Terry Hatcher. Mm-hmm. Hey, do I know that kid from something? Mm-hmm. Hey, it's Joe Piscopo. But yeah, the second watching actually made me... Well, I was bummed that I had to watch it again. I guess is the way to put it. So if you've never seen it, watch it once and take any good feelings from it, and live with those good memories. At least that's my feeling. Maybe I'm being a little harsh, though. What do you think?
Wow. So you mean in the normal show prep that we do, where we watch an episode like 4, maybe 5 times, this did not reach the 5-time mark.
This did not reach the 3-time mark for me.
Okay.
Honestly.
Okay.
And maybe if I'd watched it a third time, I would have been like, oh, but wait a minute, I didn't catch the thing. The guy in the third row in the comedy club's wearing a carnation, and that obviously means no.
Right.
No.
This does not hold up. No, patently it does not hold up. But is it a bad episode? Well, no, it's just not a good episode.
Yeah.
It just, the whole thing is kind of flat. Yeah. And I guess I tipped my hand early on when I was doing the recap, because that's how the episode, you could literally just do acts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Data tells jokes, Okona goes away. And that's kind of it, because I feel like nobody really learned anything by the end of this. Okona has a little bit of an arc. He becomes a little bit of a better guy, but Okona also got out of it because he was never really the bad guy to begin with. He's just the lovable rogue.
Yeah, I don't feel like he even becomes a better guy. He wasn't bad. I mean, the whole thing. Right. And there is actually a major failing in this episode. Mm-hmm. Okona is lying the whole time, right? Mm-hmm. Or he's covering something up anyway.
Yeah.
Where's the Betazoid?
Yeah, right.
Because she's sitting right there. And when Okona says, I can't think of any reason that these people would be after me. I mean, she should be pulling the captain aside at that point and going, or she should just, I mean, the way she's acted in the past, she should say, why are you lying to the captain right now, Captain Okona?
Right.
I mean, it's oh, wow. The more I think about it, the less. Go. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
No. Because that's really about it. It doesn't hold up. But here's the thing. It's not offensively bad to me, like, say, And the Children Shall Lead, or something like that, where you just go, wow, this is
how horrible. How are you going to bash And the Children Shall Lead? That show taught us so much.
Let me count the ways, Ken.
So much. I honestly take much more from And the Children Shall Lead than I do from this episode. Is this a more enjoyable episode to watch? Yes, probably only because of Billy Campbell and Terry Hatcher.
Yeah.
But there was actually more to be... seriously, the as you believe, so shall you do thing. Come on.
Should I have said the alternative factor?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. There you go. Yeah. So it wasn't painful to watch. It was just sort of forgettable to watch. We're not going to be talking about this episode a year from now or 2 years from now, or I don't know, unless this becomes sort of a barometer for the rest of the show.
Unless we get a chance to interview Terry Hatcher, in which case we will be talking about this episode a year from now.
Oh, yeah.
Or 2 years from now. Or Billy Campbell. I'm not picky.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I am picky, actually. But different things for different things. Sorry.
What's the message, Ken?
Was there one? I mean, nothing, I don't think. I mean, because, look, if he's supposed to be Han Solo is a story of redemption in Star Wars. He goes from being a bad guy, or at least a just out for himself guy in the original Star Wars movie, to a guy who will lay down his life for other people, to a guy who does fall in love, to a guy who is totally redeemed in Return of the Jedi. So you got a guy dressed up as Han Solo and cocky like Han Solo, but there's not a moment that he's bad. Do you think there was a message here?
You can't learn funny, because God knows we've tried. That's about it. Now, there are interesting ideas here. You had an interesting idea where we get a peek into the sexual mores of the enlightened, advanced 24th century humanity compared to these backward, maybe more 20th century like aliens that we run into. So that could have been, I would dare say that had this been the original series, there might have been a more interesting look at that, a more interesting take on that than what we get here. But here is just kind of a throwaway.
Is he sort of like a Harry Mudd kind of character in a way?
He could have been.
The only problem is,
but he wasn't.
Next Gen is not as straight laced as the original series was, right? If you put the Outrageous Okona in with the original series crew, he would stick out like a sore thumb in the way that Harry Mudd did, even if he doesn't play it as over the top as Mr. Carmel did.
Yeah.
I mean, he would really stick out because it's a much more straight-laced thing. I mean, is he supposed to be like so rakish and knavish? But the problem is we've seen Riker play the trombone, and we've seen Riker, in a nightclub talking that minuet, and we've seen Picard dress up like, Dixon Hill. I mean, we've seen these people sort of let loose. So when some guy comes on, he's like, whoa, I'm just sort of free loving and kind of crazy. Everybody's like, yeah, seen it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was thinking about the Harry Mudd kind of comparison at one point, and I just kind of dropped it because I felt like, I don't know, this guy is a doer. You can read that however you like. Whereas Harry Mudd is just sort of, I don't know. Harry Mudd is building robots, and he's sort of lost in his own world. This guy, Okona, is a little more redeeming than Harry Mudd. But then, like you said, he doesn't really have anything to be redeemed from because he's not necessarily a bad guy.
Right.
The turnaround is just Wesley's talk. And I'm sorry, but that was too little too late to be believable.
Yeah, even that didn't make any sense, though, because what was Okona's plan before that? His plan before that was apparently, okay, you fix my ship, then let me go, and then those guys are going to shoot me.
Right.
Right. But then he has the heartfelt talk with Wesley, and he's like, oh, on second thought, I will stick around. Because apparently now he has this other plan, which Picard goes along with without even hearing what it is.
Right.
He's like, oh, you have a plan? Well, we better get everybody up here on the ship then.
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, leave your weapons there. Well, we do want to kill this guy, but, okay, we'll leave our weapons. And, of course, that works out. Oh, we should stop talking about this episode because the more we do, the less.
Yeah. Well, hey, that might spark some interesting emails and comments, so I look forward to those. And Ken, do things get bigger and better next week?
Things next week, John, get loud as a whisper.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. You all have been great. Be sure to tip your playback device. Audience program off.